Yes, hi everybody. This is Doc Ollie again, and today I want to tell you part three of the three brains. So, in part one, we were talking a little bit more about the microbiome and the connections to the brain. In part two, we were talking mainly about energies and how you capture energy picture and how maybe the heart and the brains of different people do synchronize within the person and between different persons. And today we want to go a little bit more into the brain waves and the energy of the brain waves, and also see whether essential oils do have frequencies or energies. And so that's what I want to do today with you, and let's get started. Last time you heard that everything is frequency. I talked to you a little bit about quantum physics, the string theory. I talked to you about life, vibration, oscillation, all these things. So life in general is energy. And I told you that the brain is connected with the gut, or the other way around. The brain is connected to the heart is connected to the brain, and the heart is connected to the gut, and the other way around. So really, really important to understand these connections and the communications, which are partially through nerves, partially through the endocrine system, and also partially through these different energies that we discussed. And we talked about how you can do energy exchange between humans and animals, and between animals. So if you didn't see that lecture and you want to go back, then you need to either buy the access to the symposium or buy the set of DVDs, so you can go back at any given time on your convenience, on your computer, and just watch that from the convenience of your home. So today we want to continue with the energy exchange. And of course, we talked a lot about energy exchange between brains and hearts in general. But today I just want to go a little bit more into the brain itself. And we know for hundreds of years, people were able to do what we call telepathy, where you would be apart from another person, but at the same time, they could think about each other and think the same things. So telepathy is really kind of a very interesting field, but we have really never been able scientifically to show what's really going on. And so, we know that what we call brain signal correlation exists. We can measure it with different methods. They were measuring EEG on different people. They were measuring what we call functional MRIs, where we looked at where at any given time is the best use of oxygen in that brain, or the most use of oxygen. So we knew what kind of brain part was active, but we just still don't know exactly how that would work when we correlate brain signals. And that's really the frontier of energy medicine, biofield medicine, where we try to get more information on these things. So there's an interesting movement out there called Theta healing. And so I want to go a little bit into that and explain to you what Theta healing means and why it's called Theta healing and what can be maybe done to improve it. So for that, you need to understand brain waves. So we have different type of brain waves. So these are four, there's more, but these are four main brain waves that you're going to see in an EEG. So when I talk to you right now with open eyes and I'm really attentive and I'm moving my hands around and do all these gestures, I'm in something we call beta brain waves. Beta brain waves have a certain frequency, they're a little higher. So the frequency is higher because, of course, I'm awake, I have my open eyes. And the frequency of beta brain waves is around 15 to 30 hertz. So the next frequency, when I close my eyes and I start to kind of slow down and to concentrate a little bit, maybe to go even in meditation, my brain waves will slow down, and we call these alpha waves. Alpha waves come really up when you start daydreaming, when you go slowly into a meditation, just when you start relaxing. So brain wave will slow down. And alpha brain waves are typically about 9 to 15 hertz. Then the next deeper level is when you go into deep relaxation, into sleep and all these things, where you're really calming down, then your brain waves go even slower. We call these theta waves. And theta waves are anywhere between 4 and 8 hertz. And when you go even slower, then you go into delta brain waves, and delta brain waves are those that occur when you sleep. And you see that delta frequency is about 1 to 3 hertz. And so we know that the theta waves, they happen when you're in deep relaxation, when you're in meditation, when you sleep. And it's a very important or interesting fact that when you like in beta and alpha activity, so you're thinking about a problem, you're talking about something, just before you have these kind of, we call the light bulb go on, the aha effect, right? The aha moment, then we see a burst of theta activity. So theta seems not only to be connected to meditation, slowing down, it also seems to be connected to problem solving, which is quite interesting when you do theta healing, because at that point you want to really go and solve problems for the person, that your client or your patient. So I've been doing brainwave measurements for quite some time. I mean, this is about 10 years ago or even longer. And that's a good friend of ours, Roel Kwandheim and Connie McDaniel. And of course, everybody that enters our home needs to be, let's say, experimented on, right? So when you come and visit me, I mean, hey, I'll put you something around your head. I'll do experiments with you. And if you're lucky, you'll be able to walk out of the house again. But in this case, what I did, I took an older technology that was measuring some EEG points on your brain. And I could put that on my handy. And so I could look at the different brain waves on my handy. And so you can see here, what I did, I just took one, snapshot while she was kind of opening her eyes, and I made her close her eyes, all these things. But then I took the essential oils, and you see here I have an open bottle. I think it looks like peppermint. And I looked at what changed real time in her brainwaves. And I've done this with myself. I've done this with some of my dogs, but they didn't like to smell too much on the oils. They smell really strong to them. And I was not really able to measure good brainwaves on them. But anyway, so here you can even see the concentration. You can measure the concentration depending on the amount of alpha and beta wave, for example. So that was an interesting study. And then I went ahead and I looked at what else can be done. And you see this is something called quantitative electroencephalogram. And what you do, you basically take an EEG, a full spectrum EEG, and you let people smell something. And then you look at whether the EEG is slowing down or not. And you see with lavender or with the eugenol here, you get red parts, which means the part of this brain is slowing down. Whereas when you take sandalwood, it speeds up. Well, we know that certain oils support a healthy blood flow in the brain, and therefore you would think probably more activity in the brain. And so that would make sense. And so I went this route, and I went and did a full spectrum EEG on my own brain. So this is absolutely a normal EEG because it's mine, right? Must be normal. And what we did, we took a premium starter kit, and I smelled on all 11 oils of the premium starter kit. And then on the TV screen, I was able to watch real-time live what my brain was doing. And so I obtained different pictures, and I was able to look at different parts of the brain at different wavelengths. And here I was smelling an oil that basically activated my left frontal part. So the left frontal brain is really where you get all the stuff that comes from the outside to your eyes, to your ears, where you process all this input, and it's your logical thinking. So when I do my taxes, I would use a lot my left brain. So what essential oil was really used when it activated my left frontal brain? What do you think? Well, and the other question is, how long do you think did it take for that effect to show up? Well, it showed up within 2 to 3 seconds. So the moment you really take a bottle, you open the bottle, you smell, you basically see real time the change happening in the brain. So peppermint oil was able to activate my brain within 2 or 3 seconds on the left frontal part. The next picture you see is the left temporal part. That's where I have my ear. So that has to do with hearing, with language, with processing. So what oil do you want to put up in the aroma diffuser so the people in your household will be listening more to you? What oil will increase the attention of other people to you? And the answer is it was lemon. Then I had an oil, or 3 oils in fact, in the premium starter kit that slow down my limbic system. What oil would slow down within seconds my limbic system? So I had a very happy limbic system, and therefore de-stressing, kind of, my emotions kind of slow, not very excited. Which oils? There were stress away, of course the name says it all, lavender, and very interesting also frankincense. And the last oils, there were a couple oil blends in the premium starter kit that really activated my entire brain. And what oils would that be? What 2 blends do you think activate almost the entire brain within a few seconds? Well, one of these oils was thieves. Thieves, I have one here, right? So every once in a while when I feel tired in my office, I just smell thieves. Smells good, right? But it activates the brain. And the other one was digize, for digestion. Why would thieves and digize activate my brain? Well, you have lemon in there, for example, in thieves. So we already talked about lemon, how it activates the listening skills. But you have the spices and fruits in there that are really activating. I mean, God created all spices not just to spice the foods, but also to make the brain really intelligent. All the spices will increase cognition in the brain and memory and all these things. And there's plenty of scientific studies about some spices in essential oils or the herbs without the essential oils that will increase the cognitive function of a brain. So here it really would make sense that with those two oils, you can really activate the entire brain right away. This is another device, and I had the honor to be in Japan when they launched that in Japan. That's a little, again, a device that goes around your hat, and you smell an essential oil, and then within a few seconds, about 30 seconds, the device will tell you what part is activated. In this case, if you could read Japanese, it said I was relaxed. Of course, I was just smelling stress away 30 seconds earlier. And it's quite interesting because you can then exchange these kind of information over Instagram or Facebook, and you can create entire groups that have the same reactions like you do to the certain oils, things like that. And it was quite fun. The next thing is that is really, really interesting. I'm involved in CBD, cannabidiol, since many, many years. And I have been doing a lot of research, and I have been using it on myself, on patients, in my family. And I've been mixing CBD with many different essential oils to get different effects. And I've been researching a lot on that area. And I'm also an anesthesiologist and intensive care physician by trade. So this is something that is really close to what I do as a profession, or what I used to do now that I'm retired from the hospital. And it's really interesting that when you look at CB receptors, you have two types of those. They're all across your body. So you have an endocannabinoid system in your body. And in fact, I'm writing a book about that. You should then buy it. Maybe it's already out on the market by the time you see this lecture. And I will tell you much more why this is also important for your body and so interesting. And so what was interesting here is that we found a connection between theta waves and cannabinoid receptors, and not any other waves. So only theta waves could be activated through CBD systems. When you think about it, it makes sense because CBD is known to de-stress the body, and therefore you go more easily into a theta brainwave, which is a de-stress brainwave, is a meditation brainwave. And so if you do these kind of meditation in general, you do yoga, or if you do theta meditation or theta healing, you could, of course, improve that by more training, so you're better at it, but also by relaxing and de-stressing. So there's many methods on how you can do that, just slow breathing, music, oming, but also grounding. I'm going to show you a little bit more about that. And essential oils, of course. So if you use stress away, lavender, frankincense, I just showed you how they relax my limbic system. So, of course, that would lead you to a much faster theta brainwave. And then I just told you with the last slide that CBD, cannabidiol, from hemp oil is really something that can also help you with de-stressing and activating some receptors. So that was really about brainwaves and how oils and other things do act on brainwaves. But now let's go to the oils. And it has been a question for a long, long time. Do essential oils have frequencies? And I want to walk you real quick through to what we know and what we don't know about this, because a lot of people talk about it, but very few know about it. And of course, the one that knows most about it is unfortunately not with us anymore, at least in his physical body. He's still with us in spirit and mind because we carry out his mission. He's our mentor, our leader, our visionary, Gary Young, who in fact did the early measurements on the frequency on the oils. So let me walk you through that. So the first time I heard about oils have frequency, I thought, oh my God, these people are crazy. How could an oil have a frequency? And this is what I saw. I said, yeah, right. This is for people who like to hug trees, right? It's like my scientific brain had really trouble getting around this idea that an essential oil might have a frequency. But then again, I just pulled back and I just stepped back and thought about it. And I said, well, in chemistry, we learned about certain rules of nature. And when I look at, like, say frankincense is made out of hundreds of different compounds. And each compound has a chemical structure. As you see here, boswellic acid or insensiol acetate or alpha-pinene. All of these are chemical structures. Now, doesn't mean it's synthetic. In the real plant, they called organic chemistry because it's in the living plant. But these have structures. And every time you see these structures come together here, these are attachments, and they made with certain forces. So they need to attach. And most of the time, electrons, and we talked about that in part 2, are part of these forces that put these things together. This is why metals, for example, are good conductors, because they can almost all these molecules melt together, or atoms, and the electrons are freely shared. So they can run from one end to the other pretty easily once you have a block of iron, for example. And so therefore you have metals that are easy conductors or not so easy conductors. But what I want to say to you is you need to look at all these connections in between where these different chemical structures attach to each other. And we know that this happens with these electrons partially, and they have frequencies. And for here, I'm going to have to really quickly make a change here and show you how these things do. So you see different movements that you have in these molecules, and these different movements will determine how the vibration looks like, right? And so you have symmetrical, asymmetrical, scissoring, bending, wagging, twisting, rocking, all these things. And these are vibrations, and you can measure these vibrations. And so, of course, if an essential oil has structures, organic structure, it must have these vibrations. And these vibrations, of course, create a frequency. So it's the law of nature. The essential oils and many other things do have frequency. And so let's go back to our mentor and friend and leader and visionary, Gary Young, right? So he early on started researching that. These are pictures of his first labs. And Mary graciously walked to the cellar with me, and we found a box with some devices, and I looked through those, and then I talked to Gary about that. And one of the devices that was fascinating was this wooden box, and the serial number was carved in with a knife in the back, so there were only a few of these boxes out there. And we figured out that Gary had used this box decades ago, to measure frequencies in the field. And what they did at the time, they took, let's say, a weed that was not supposed to grow in that field and was kind of interrupting the growth of normal plants. They put it in a glass of water, they kind of morselled it, made it small pieces, and then they measured the frequency of that plant, and then they put that frequency out on the field by having a big grounding plate and a big antenna. And what they were able to show in 70-80% of the cases, Gary saw, and the manufacturer of this machine claimed, that you would have less of that weed in that field and better plant recovery, therefore. So it was quite interesting. And so let's go back to really early research that Gary Young did. Again, I told you he was a man, a visionary. He did stuff 30 years ago that today is still considered cutting-edge research. So what he did at the time in the greenhouse, he took some plants that were treated with frequency. Then he took a row that was not treated at all. Then he took a row that was treated with something called biogenesis. And biogenesis, when you go back, this is a friend of Gary, Bruce, and I'll tell you a little bit more in a second. And he was a biologist. He tried to improve the quality of the soils by mixing probiotics in the soil. So go back to part 1 where we talked about functional agriculture. This is functional agriculture by adding probiotics and other things to the soil to improve the soil. And then Gary took a row of plants where he treated them with frequency and with those biogenesis treated soils, meaning having probiotics in the soil. And what he was able to show is that when you treat it with frequency and biogenesis soil, you had a much better plant growth than in the other rows. So quite interesting. And so he said, for a number of years during my clinical practice, I researched the use of electrical energy for the purpose of reversing the disease process. I kept feeling that there had to be a more natural way of increasing a person's electrical frequency, which led to the discovery of the electrical frequency of essential oils. So that's how he did it, and he used this machine. This machine is called the BT3, Bruce Tainio, and Bruce Tainio was a friend of his, and they got together, of course, because Gary and Bruce being the biologist trying to create a company to improve soil for farmers, and Gary being the farmer who wanted to improve his plants to have a better essential oils coming out of the plant. Of course, these two guys met, and they were both geniuses and visionaries. Bruce had a device where he was trying to measure the frequencies that they would treat the plants with. And I guess that's what it happened. One day, Gary just said, well, let's use that device to also measure the oils. And this is what happened, and this is the chart that you see everywhere on the internet, like Rose has a very high frequency of 320 megahertz. It's measured in megahertz. There was one early publication in hertz, but that was a translation mistake or a copying mistake, and it was all megahertz at the end of the day. And he published that in his first edition of the Essential Oils Desk Reference, and also mentioned it in a couple early books that he wrote. So again, could you repeat those measurements today? The answer is no, absolutely not. Even if the device still exists, and I know there is one still around, at least two I know of, but today's world is so full of interference from Wi-Fi, telephones, satellites, whatever, that even if you go out on a field, you're going to have trouble being able to have a complete isolated kind of area where you do not have interference to measure those things. So I think what needs to happen one day is that we need to go into a place where they have a completely isolated chamber where we could do these frequency measurements. I'm thinking of NASA or something like that. But anyway, so this is what's out there, and this is how it was measured. So you understand that. And it's really the only measurement out there. This is what it is. And I can say with very good conscience, yes, the essential oils do have frequencies. That's law of nature. And whether these measurements were absolutely accurate, we don't know. It was probably not the best device, but at the time we didn't have that much interference. So I think it's the only thing we have at this point. So let's look at another thing here. As the last thing, I want to look at the Earth and humans in general. And we know that the Earth has also a frequency. We know in space you have all these cosmic storms and the sun is sending out, frequencies like crazy. And all these kind of storms and these attacks, they touch the atmosphere of the Earth. And the Earth is like hanging around, globe, hanging in this atmosphere, and it starts bouncing a little bit. And because this is pretty regular, you get a frequency in the Earth, and you get 7 different frequencies, but the main frequency is called the Schumann frequency. And when you look at the Schumann frequency, you see it's 7.83 hertz. Now, where have you seen this number before? Have you seen this number before? Have you paid attention? Yes, 783 hertz is theta wave, right? It's right there where we have theta brainwaves. So that means if you could coordinate your brainwaves with the base of the Earth, that means you would be more relaxed, less stress, and you would be more in a meditative state. And that's where the whole idea of grounding or earthing comes from. If you go barefoot on a field, you should be able to pick up the energy of the earth and therefore influence the energy of your brain. And we can show that in the science. So here in the first curve, you see people were wearing shoes, and this is a measurement of the stress hormone cortisol. And you see much higher curves than when they were barefoot and in contact with the earth. So that shows you that you can reduce stress hormone secretion in the body when you do earthing or grounding. This is another study that showed very similar things. They measured many more things like muscle systems, breathing, heart, and so on, and even EEG waves. And they saw immediately when you started earthing, you either had an activation or deactivation of certain things, but they all showed that you were basically de-stressing. And so I had the absolute pleasure to be with Gary for almost 2 weeks up in Northern Lights at Canada Farm. And, in Canada, you have these Northern Lights that are just absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. And Gary's, one of his favorite oils, really Northern Lights black spruce, because he always said, Ollie, look, these trees, these black spruce, do you see how high they're like big deflector for lightnings, right? I mean, it's lightning rods. And they have, then very nice roots. And you could really feel when we went into the field and there were the Nordic lights were on, you could touch these trees and you could really feel this kind of energy that was coming down the trees. And Gary always said, this energy we capture in the oil. And so they're going to grow many more plants up there that's going to capture all this energy. It's absolutely wonderful oil. And I diffuse it basically every day in my office. It's like Northern Lights. It's not just the memory that I had with a good friendship with Gary and when we were up there together. I believe that what he told me is absolute true. And this energy of the sky is coming through these trees down into the oil at the end of the day. And going back again 20, 30 years, he was able again to show that you had much better roots, you were much better grounded when you use frequency and probiotics in the soil and good soils compared to the other plants. And so, Gary has done years and decades ago what people should start doing now. And this is why, one of the reasons why you have such high quality oils at Young Living. So to bring it all back together, right? We have at least 3 command centers. We have 3 brains. We have the regular brain, we have the brain of the heart, and we have the brain of the gut. And I showed you now in these 3 parts how these things interfere with each other or communicate with each other and how that works, how a healthy gut influences a healthy brain, influences a healthy heart, and the other way around. How feelings, will be influenced by the gut, will influence the heart after they influence the brain. So you see all these connections between these different parts of your brains. And we all know that these 3 different brains can communicate in different ways, and the microbiome is absolutely crucial. Conclusion 2, your microbiome is good. It needs to be good. You need to support it. That's a good idea. How do you do this? I showed you probiotics, prebiotics. What are prebiotics? Prebiotics are fibers. So you can take things like ICP,
that are really full. Now, even Ninja Red has pectin in it. That's the fibers from the citrus fruits. So just drink and eat these things, take these supplements that Young Living has for you. Essential oils do support the microbiome. We know that from the science. Healthy lifestyle, food and exercise support a healthy microbiome. Stress reduction supports a healthy microbiome. Avoiding toxins in food, in household, in personal care, and other products. This is why Young Living is so important, the Young Living lifestyle, because you can use any product at Young Living and support your microbiome. This is really, talking about microbiome and the microbiome of the soil. I had the honor to be with Gary when he was in Mexico, and he was looking to buy new land for Young Living and build a new farm. And as we were walking for a full day through this farm, because Gary doesn't buy land or used to buy land by just flying over with a helicopter or driving over with a Jeep or a car, he would walk it off. He needed to know how it feels on his boots, whether the soil is wet and dry, and whether it has incline or decline or it's flat, all these things.
So we were in Mexico walking through this field, and suddenly he said, Ollie, you need to start tasting the soil because you could taste a lot of things. So I thought, what? You want me to eat the dirt? And say, yeah, you need to taste. So I said, okay, I'll do it, So I put it in my mouth and I started chewing on it and all of that. It wasn't really particularly good, but really, so the first time I said, oops, okay, done, it's cool. But every 5 minutes he made me stop and eat. And so after about 3, 4, 5 times, you started really feeling a difference. You could tell whether it was nutritious. Of course, the moisture you could tell, but he would tell me, look, this taste means there's not enough nitrogen in the floor, in the soil, and things like that. So it was really an interesting thing. But after about an hour tasting, I said, Gary, look, I'm pretty full. I think I had it. I had my dinner and lunch together here. And so he looks at me, and those who knew Gary, the way he was, he started grinning, like up to his ears. And he looks at me and said, Ollie, we taste these things, but we don't swallow, right? So I told him, oh my God, you could have told me earlier that, right? Anyway, so, and I know Jared and many others went to that with him too. That's one of his jokes. He was always a really good jokester. But anyway, eating the soil is really important.
And why is it so important? Well, because conclusion number 3, you need to improve your own soil. Not just the Young Living seed to seal is important, but your seed to seal in your own body is important. Because your soil, your cells are an important part. Your soil is in your gut, it's your microbiome. If you do not take care of your soil, if you do not do seed to seal with your own gut, you're not going to be healthy, period. Because it's so important for your own health. So my message to you is seed to seal is not just for the oils and the Young Living products. Seed to seal is also for you personally. Then conclusion 4, we know everything has frequency, and frequency is everything. I taught you that. Number 5, well, we know now energy medicine is a somewhat new field of medicine, and it's really important. And you saw how we can interfere or communicate from person to person, from heart to brain, brain to heart, and I'm sure from gut to gut. And that's what explains at the end of the day, speak and listen to your heart, speak with your heart, listen to your gut, follow your gut, all of that now starts making sense, I hope, right? And you need to support your inner energies. And I'm talking about emotional energy, nutritional energy, spiritual energy, physical energy. You need to work out. Social energy. You need to have friends. This is why the Young Living tribe, the family is so important. But also financial energy. Because if the finances are not okay, so much grief comes from that. So many divorces come from that. So financial freedom is also good. And that's what Young Living can bring you. And then the questions, do essential oils have frequency? Yes, it's the law of nature. They must have frequency, right? And I showed you why. So every physics professor and chemical professor should understand that they do have frequency, and they should teach that. The only question is, how do we best measure that? And the only measurements we have are quite old. They were made with a probably not optimal device, but it's the only thing we have. So at this point, I would say, it's up to you to decide whether you want to use those tables that Gary published at the time, or whether you want to wait until we have a new technology where we can maybe measure that with new technology. And I wouldn't be astonished if a new technology will measure about the same as Gary did at the old times. And then, conclusion 7, that's a conclusion I have been struggling with as a physician for many, many years.
Because we have to really ask ourselves, who are we that we have the right to say that something that has worked for hundreds, if not thousands of years, is not valid scientifically? If people have felt good after acupuncture treatment, after certain massages or whatever that treatment was for thousands of years, and it has helped them with their health and wellness and mental cognition and all these things, even with beauty. Who are we to say today in modern science that this is all cuckoo because we can just not prove it? Right? I just showed you how we were able probably to prove the meridian systems, because these meridians, these Bonghang channels, go along the meridian points, right? So anyway, it's just like this hubris, this arrogance that we have, especially as physicians and scientists, that we kind of just poo-poo stuff that has been around for thousands of years. And I just think we don't have the right to do so. And Gary Young has been teaching me a lot about this, because I came into the game kind of thinking like that. And of course, he came from the other side, and we found each other in the middle, where we used modern technology for diagnosis and other things. And then we used all the technologies maybe to support whatever needs to be done in for your health and supporting your brain, your body, your skin, whatever it is, and your gut.
And the last conclusion is really you have only one life, at least so we think in most of our religions, so make the most out of it. Don't put trash in your temple. Again, it's about maintaining a healthy microbiome and a healthy body. So you need to exercise, you need to eat health. Everything we have talked about in these 3 parts, right? So with that, I would really like to thank you that you have been part of this, that you have been watching this. I hope you watched all 3 parts. If you missed some of the part 1 or part 2, be aware that you can buy an access online where you download it, or you just access it for a full year. Or you can also buy the DVD sets that we sell at the end of the day. And I hope you really enjoyed it. By the way, these DVD sets and the downloads, they have typically between 35 and 60 lectures. If you like this type of lecture, you want to maybe listen to more, that's the way to go, because you can beat that price. I mean, each lecture is like $1 or $1.50, something like that. And there's like 30, 40 hours worth of lectures on these DVDs regarding essential oils, farms, how to grow plants, personal development, how to build your business. I mean, on and on and on and on. So please join the symposium. The next one, again, will probably be when you see this. This is in May 2019, and we do this always in May every year.
And I'm really happy that you were able to watch at least part 3, if not part 1, part 2, part 3. And I really want to thank you for being part of this Global Online Symposium. That way you enable many more people to get educated, and you're part of 10,000s of people that are doing this right now. So with that, I hope you're going to enjoy some other lectures also, and I wish you all the best in your life. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.